Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, August 9th. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see none. Basically nothing going on. Yeah, an area of, what is that, 24-foot seas in the far southeast Atlantic, all aimed east, having no impact or no expected impact to our forecast area up here. Maybe a little bit of sideband swell for Chile. Cutoff low here. Maybe creating some minimal surf, what's that, again, about 24-foot seas for Tahiti, but basically not a favorable pattern down south. Let's dive into the details real quick. First off, we'll take a look at jet stream level winds. These winds, up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of storms. When those storms do form, help direct their track. But currently, we have a very non-favorable pattern. That is a split jet stream flow, as split as you can get, with the southern branch running down here, meandering down around 65 south, and basically just continuing east on that path, with the northern branch up here at about, 27 or so, running basically east as well, and a bunch of dead air in between. This dead air in between is what supports the formation of high pressure. What you really want to see is a bow in the southern branch going this way. That would help support low pressure, and that, of course, is how swell is generated. But we don't see any of that. No troughs, split jet stream flow, dead air in between, and even here a bit of this would be called a ridge supporting high pressure in the atmosphere, low pressure here, but what we want to see is low pressure south of Tahiti. That would help drive the Southern Oscillation Index negative, and it's still a little bit negative at this moment. We'll get into that in a minute, but for the immediate future, nothing obvious supporting pushing it deeper south for the next few days. Let's put this into motion. We'll just roll this out, and you can kind of see, I'm just keeping my eyes down here to the south, mainly, and also watching this ridge here south of Tahiti, and there's just nothing going on. Now here we go, finally, come about Thursday night or Friday, we see a bit of a trough forming here. That would support low pressure south of Tahiti, driving the Southern Oscillation Index negative, but that is nothing for surf in the immediate future. That's all about El Nino and looking for signs of the atmosphere being coupled with the developing El Nino. And of course it is, and we'll get into that later. And then finally we get out about 138 hours, and here we go. We see some semblance of a trough. This is Sunday, so we're almost a week out now, 156 hours, but no wind energy going into this trough. We'll roll this out a little bit more. And then finally, here we go, a glimmer of hope at about 180 hours out, a weak trough forming under New Zealand with what is that, about 110 knot winds. That would help support gale formation. This would be the first gale in quite a while down in the Southwest Pacific, and it was extremely prolific earlier this season south in this area. And this is the area that you'd expect to see a lot of activity if El Nino were in play, and clearly it is. Next up, we take a look at surface level pressure and surface level winds. We're looking for 35 knot, preferably 40 knot winds or greater, pushing up to the northeast. I don't see it. See some 30 knot winds pushing towards Antarctica. Another batch of 40 knot winds, again pushing towards Antarctica. These winds here, the ice line's down around here at 65. Nothing going on there. And then a cutoff low. Remember the two jet stream flows, one up here, one down here. This guy has no jet stream support, but this is the low that was south of Tahiti here and had been for better part of 2 weeks, helping to drive the Southern Oscillation Index negative. It's moving off to the east. High pressure, as you can see, is taking over south of Tahiti. That will push the SOI back up towards probably positive territory. We'll roll this out, and we see that high pressure there continues. We're looking both here and down here at the same time. And here's another cutoff low, trying to get organized here. This is on about Wednesday. And then finally by about Thursday, notice low pressure, cutoff low, south of Tahiti again. Also notice high pressure here. East winds pushing up the East Australian coast, Southern Hemi Booster Index. That's a contributor to El Nino. High pressure in this area, southerly winds that flow up. And then notice this, they make the bend. Now it doesn't show it here, but if you get, the idea is these winds feed the westerly anomalies on the equator in the Kelvin wave generation area and help amplify El Nino. But anyway, from a swell perspective, still not seeing anything at 96 hours. We'll roll this out. That low does pretty good, though, south of Tahiti. Here's another gale, trying to get organized. Actually, high pressure here, gale here, gradient, winds all pushing towards Antarctica. and we're almost a week out. And then notice the low here starts forming. Remember, we saw a trough under New Zealand about a week out. Well, if you believe the model's a week out, there we go. It peaked out, what's that, 45 knot winds forecast basically a week from now. Aimed pretty much to the east, and then we'll see if it goes anywhere from there. And it kind of just meanders along. Not a big one, but that's a start. Maybe if we get some seas out of it. In fact, let's go see what happens. And so here we go, significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean. Notice we saw some fetch in this area, and sure enough, there are seas. Was that 20... 22, 24, 25 feet. Oh yeah, 25.9 into peak, right at that little X right there, with 43 knot winds from 300 degrees, so they're actually pushing down this way. Not a good thing, certainly for the California or Hawaii area, and not even that great for Chile. Anyway, put this into motion, roll this out, cut off low, that same low south of Tahiti. Not a whole lot going on. We're just looking for seas. Again, here we go, 22-foot seas, but they're aimed at New Zealand, not to the north. Cut off low, again, the jet stream's south of there. And the cutoff lows just typically do not develop into a whole lot. They sometimes show strong on the charts, but when they actually develop, they don't materialize nearly as strong as they are forecast early in the charts. Okay, here we go. 30-foot seas forecast about a week out. Only good for the Tasman Sea and Fiji. And this is that little gale that we were watching. Let's go examine it some more. See, this isn't even in the California or Hawaii swell wind. It's all blocked by, for the most part, by New Zealand. And then you get out here and the thing falls apart. So not a whole lot going on surf-wise for the South Pacific. Let's take a quick look at the North Pacific. And so here we are. Significant seas for the North Pacific Ocean. Not a whole lot going on except for the tropics. Hurricane Hilda, southeast of Hawaii, and Molave, southeast of Japan. Let's go take a quick look at Hilda. Here's the forecast for where it's supposed to go, moving right into Hilo out on the 14th. But the interesting part, it peaked out yesterday. That was on Saturday with winds 115 knots. That's 132 miles an hour. That's a fairly strong system. Forecast, but it's already down to 95 knots as of the 18Z run, or 18Z today. And forecast, you can see the wind speeds projected to by the 18th, moving into Hilo, 30 knots. That's barely depression status. Probably not much of an event. Previous runs have had this system moving a little bit north of Hilo up in here, and basically completely dying out. Regardless, it's probably a pretty decent bout of 15-second period east to southeast swell for Hilo, and the southeast facing shores of the Big Island. Not so sure. Maybe some energy up into some of the islands here, east facing shores, but probably not a whole lot. So let's take a look at the wave charts and see how that goes. And I'm not so much watching here. We've talked about that. It's this system here, and there's something really interesting supposed to happen. Notice it's going to the northeast, and it's forecast to build a little bit for that matter. 22-foot seas into Friday night. Actually, let's go back and let's verify that right there. Make sure, oops, we'll do it this way. There we go. And 13 north, no, that's not. That's this other new system developing here. Okay, so 22-foot seas on the Great Circle Pass to Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. That's a couple days out, and more than a couple days for the U.S. West Coast. If this develops, 126 hours is a long way. And notice then it goes even further to making it into almost the Western Gulf, and trying to redevelop. Another tropical system, if you can believe it, forming down here, and we're 180 hours out. The important part is, if this system, in fact, does recurve, that is indicative of the jet stream changing. We could actually take a look at the North Pacific jet stream charts, and we will do that in a second. But the point being, typically you do not see this recurvature of storms during La Nina years, only during El Nino years, or only during bouts of the active phase of the MJO, and that's because the jet stream typically gets goosed up and sort of pushes further south and picks up these storms and helps redirect their path. This is how the big 97 El Nino, it started off with a 10-foot at 25-second period swell in September, which was a tropical system that recurved. We've also seen tropical systems do this recurve thing and send swell into California and Hawaii, for that matter, as early as August 15th. This is very close to being on track with that. That would suggest good, and this is practical level, not index level, but practical level monitoring of El Nino's impacts on the atmosphere to give us clues of what's to come for the fall and winter months ahead. If the system does what it's supposed to do, that is definitely a sign in the right direction. Let's take a quick look at the jet stream chart. So here we are, jet stream level winds for the North Pacific Ocean. The 9th of August, we see the jet stream, parts of it at least, down around 45 south, if not more, a trough trying to form. No wind of interest associated with it. Then a big ridge here supporting high pressure at the surface, not doing a whole lot. And then another little trough trying to organize. This is in August. This is actually a reasonable, not an outstanding jet stream chart, but again, we're doing this from memory. It's been since 97, so what's that, almost 18 years since we've had a good El Nino with and to really be able to go and examine the jet stream with. But here we go, just roll this out. You can see then it sort of splits, not looking nearly as good, but still for August, any of this is quite good. Typically you'd see the jet up here in the Bering Sea somewhere. And again, here's our trough off the U.S. West Coast on Thursday. Sort of a split flow going on here, but notice this. Then things somehow get organized and start digging out a trough theoretically on Saturday and Sunday, and that supports that redevelopment of Malave there near the date line, and we're about 180 hours out. But big ridge persists here in the Gulf of Alaska, though, another little trough pushing down the coast. So by and large, not awesome jet stream pattern, but, not too bad given we're, barely into the second week of August. So not bad. We'll take it. So since we're talking El Nino, and since there is no real surf to speak of, let's just get right into the details. I know everyone's interested. Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin and Tahiti. This is a good sign of at least, if there's negative numbers here in the daily average, which we're down at minus 4.3, but look, we've been through a good run here. We'll go back. It's been negative. Well, look at that. I don't really see any positive numbers there in the whole month, and quite a nice little negative burst here. Remember, we saw that low pressure system south of Tahiti? That's what was driving all this, and at the same time, there was high pressure over Darwin. You can see the numbers here. That drove it very negative, minus 31.7 there at one point. Now things are starting to let up, and we saw that high pressure is going to build south of Tahiti, so we expect the numbers to rise for a couple of days, but then it's supposed to fall negative again, and big high pressure is working its way into the Darwin area, as well as the low pressure build south of Tahiti. So we expect a good drop again by the weekend or so. Also note the 30-day running average is falling too. It's picking up on these numbers again, so it's starting to nudge it. There's a bit of a lag, but here we're at minus 18.21. Very good. In fact, that exceeds the previous reading back. Oh, no, not yet. No, we still got to get down to minus 20 or so. But still, we're not in bad shape. And then the running average here, minus 13.08. This is the 90-day running average. I'd like to see it down around minus 15, minus 18 if we're talking strong El Nino, but we're very early in the game still. Once you kick into the fall, that's when these numbers typically really go wild, and El Nino juices itself up. If we're doing these kind of numbers in August, that's a pretty good sign. That gives us reason for some hope here that certainly the legs aren't going to fall out on this thing. We're way past that point. But just now the question is, how strong is El Nino going to get? But anyway, the numbers look good as of right now. And of course, here's another way to look at the 30-day SOI average over time, going back 2 years. On the positive side here, or when numbers are up in the positive side here, that's indicative of La Nina, and that's basically what 2013 was all about. 2014, here's our false start El Nino that never really quite got its act together. But here we are now in 2015. We got one bottom low here. When was that? Oh, about late May or so. We had a spike. Then we got into July, another low, peak low, and now we're heading down again, and we expect to at least equal this low here and then continue perhaps down from there. So this is very good news. Again, we want to be in the 15 to 20 range and hold in there for, well, at least until December. Next up, surface level wind anomalies. What we want to see is westerly winds to help feed El Nino. If you have westerly winds in this box, and I'll draw it right here, roughly from about 135 to 170 and a couple degrees either side of the equator. If you have westerly anomalies, that doesn't necessarily mean westerly winds, but just anomalies. Differences in normal. Normally there's trades here blowing out of the east. If those trades slacken, they take warm water that's normally pulled up in this area, start pushing it to the east. Now the funny part is, it doesn't do it on the surface. That warm water falls to depths, travels the entire way into the Galapagos Islands and Ecuador, erupts on the surface, forms a whirlpool here, and that is the signature, the hallmark sign of El Nino. So for right now, we're going back in history to August 3rd, and we just sort of look, and you just see continuous westerly anomalies through the 7th. If anything, building a bit, looking quite, actually pretty impressive. And notice to the south here as well. Also, one other thing, we're going to look for southerly winds along the east coast of Australia. A little bit going on there, a little bit there, a little bit north. These are anomalies. But again, that southern hemi booster index thing we were talking about, south winds go up here, they make the turn, feed into the Kelvin wave generation area, we call it, area where you get these westerly anomalies. And this, if you get this southerly component along Australia, that is what is theorized to boost a regular El Nino into a super El Nino. And that is what we are looking for. I mean, there's a lot of hype around this El Nino turning into a super El Nino. We're looking for signs of that happening, and we're going to go into some more of the details here in a second. So typically we show some charts here, but the charts are outdated. The site has been down for a few days. So we're just sort of canceling or moving by those typical charts that we show. But here's another way to look at what's going on surface-wise. This is one day back. This is actually on the 8th of August. But you can see this is actual wind speeds, westerly winds, moderate we'll call them, in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area, but it's not even so much the actual winds, it's the anomalies. Look at this, just a beautiful little patch of westerly anomalies, and these are, I'd call moderate to almost strong anomalies right in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area, doing exactly what you would expect them to do if a good El Nino were in play for this time of year, and this looks like a textbook case. And so yet here's another way to look at both the past and the future. 850 millibar winds. These are winds up about 4,500 feet, but they're a good proxy for what's going on at the surface. And notice here, so 130, so this is the whole globe on one chart, and history going to current, going to a forecast. What we see is, so the Kelvin wave generation area runs roughly from here to here. So we're just going right up the chart and looking in this block. Reds, purples are westerly anomalies. Purples are, in fact, out and out westerly winds. So looking at the chart, you can see it's been a non-stop string of westerly anomalies. In fact, there was a very strong, it's off the end of the chart here now, very strong westerly wind burst that occurred here in the late June, early July time frame with a lot of legs on it. Kind of backed off a little bit. Then it started pulsing again. The end of July interaction with an equatorial Rossby wave, and now another little pulse of maybe equatorial Rossby wave interference going on here, creating, I wouldn't call that a westerly wind burst, maybe a mini westerly wind burst, but it's only got a couple of days on it. But the forecast is for basically it to blow for the next 5 days at least. That would be good. I mean, just the more this goes on and the more you get this continually westerly winds and anomalies, the more warm water that gets pushed east, and that's what feeds El Nino. So we've shown this chart before. Again, 850 millibar winds, basically the same chart laid out, Kelvin wave generation area right here. But now you get to look at some of the details of what's going on. So this is the MJO here, the one that we talked about in late June, early July, with the reds interference with equatorial Rossby waves. So two things happening. The MJO, Rossby waves, creating westerly winds. Those westerly wind bursts, all these little things are tropical systems of various sorts, helping to generate, and those westerly wind bursts definitely spawn tropical systems. Okay, so here we are right now. They're showing this is like a little mini negative phase or inactive phase of the MJO. That's not really the case. It's just a filtering issue more than likely on this chart, because you really need something that spans a larger area and more time to be a real legit MJO. And here is a little Kelvin wave and a little bit of a Rossby wave interference here that's supposed to create more westerly winds. And then also notice these gray, the big line here. This is the El Nino base state forecast to build through this time frame as well. So just a more detailed view. And here is yet the same thing, yet a different, same deal. Kelvin wave generation area roughly from about here over to about here. And you can see here, but this is different. History is down here. One Kelvin wave in May, the big one in the June-July time frame, a recent little pulse here just towards the end of July. Here's the one that's forecast the next westerly wind burst in, what's that, about 4 to 5 days. Now here we can overlay the MJO. You see this one, we're actually in the down phase of the MJO. This is the active phase of the MJO here. And also notice, well, we won't get too far ahead of ourselves. Okay, so here we were in a inactive phase of the MJO, another one forecast to reappear, but then on top of that you can add equatorial Rossby waves, and here you go, equatorial Rossby wave helping to make a little push here, maybe in that this was in the August 2nd time frame, another one not even related to that. I mean, I guess we could dig deeper and say, okay, add Kelvin waves, and you could maybe stretch it to say a Kelvin wave is, but either way, there's a little pulse forecast here in the next 4 to 5 days. We'll take some of this noise out of here and let you see what's going on. Inactive phase of the MJO. The big point here is that come about the 16th to 18th in September, the active phase of the MJO is forecast. Winds are forecast to start picking up. Add in some equatorial Rossby wave activity, you get these pockets of activity going on. And the point being, and then you do the low-pass filter. And look at this. This is the El Nino base state. And if it was weak here in April, building, what do you call them? Three, I call them isobars, but they're not. They're just 3 lines, 3 depth lines. 4, 5 here into October. This is classic El Nino buildup, and of course, we know that's what's happening. We know El Nino's building. Again, would you believe any model that goes out 3 months? Of course not. But maybe a week or so, this is a good guide, and it's nice to tease yourself and look this far out in the future. It is this next pulse of the active phase of the MJO that we're interested. We want to see that happen, and see if it helps amplify the El Nino base state some. But for right now, things are looking very good. And yet to add some more data to the mix, okay, so this is a phase chart. I think we've talked about this before, and you read the chart going this way around the planet from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent to the West Pacific to US and then into Africa and back around. The MJO goes this way around the globe. So you're looking sort of down a cross section at the planet. And what you see is this is the big MJO. When was this? Back in July 5th, peaked out almost off the chart. Historically strong active phase of the MJO. Just blasted the heck out of the West Pacific with west wind anomalies, creating a massive Kelvin wave that is on its way towards Ecuador right now as we speak. But then after that, the MJO sort of collapsed. When it gets down towards this circle here, it's basically weak and inactive, or not inactive, but just not powerful at all. 2 different models basically saying the same thing, going out 2 weeks, suggesting basically no MJO activity. That's consistent with what the CFS model just showed that we looked at just a second ago. And yet another series of models. We're beating the models to death today. 2 weeks, statistical model, outgoing long wave radiation, proxy for the active or inactive phase of the MJO, suggesting some active phase going on. This is enhanced precipitation. This is decreased decreased precipitation, but this is more a filtering issue. This is not related to the MJO, we suspect, especially given all the other data we've seen. And basically the model suggests the statistical model suggesting a dead MJO pattern. The dynamic model suggesting exactly the same thing. This is actually what you would expect to see when you get a good solid El Nino base state in play. The MJO starts to disappear. So it's kind of interesting that the previous model we saw showed the active phase of the MJO coming into play about September, mid-September or so into October. We'll see if that really happens. The strong base El Nino state, if this El Nino is strong enough, should get us all the westerly anomalies we need. And the reality is, look at it. We got piles of westerly anomalies going on right now. We're not in the active or the inactive phase of the MJO. There's little bits of equatorial Rossby waves coming in there and, doing a little bit, goosing it up here and there. But the reality is most of the westerly anomalies that are occurring right now are all based on just a pure El Nino base state in and of itself. That is very good news. And finally, the 40-day long-range upper-level model. Red suggests the inactive phase of the MJO area is not supportive of precipitation, and that's what this is saying. The inactive phase is supposed to be building into the, late August time frame, working its way across the Pacific. Here's South America, here's maritime continent in this region, and then no active phase behind that, and this is into September 18th. So a little bit of a disconnect between some of the models here. Not really sure what to believe. In the end, you know what you believe. When you see westerly anomalies blowing right now on the surface, as they have been, if you look back, it's just a machine. It just goes and goes and goes. That's the signal you want. The future, who knows what it might hold, but the more the westerly anomalies continue and westerly wind bursts occur, the more they're going to continue to occur with moving into the fall season with a solid El Nino in play. So we've talked all about westerly winds in this area. We've talked about them blowing warm water from this region, and notice water temperatures are cooler here, towards the east, towards Ecuador, warming this area. Here we go, current low-res imagery suggesting a very nice warm pool building up off of Ecuador. Now, this isn't super great compared to 97, but in and of itself, it's good. But it hasn't been building much lately. In fact, there's been a bit of a pause going on. Let's go back. 716, here's the data. We're just going to roll through in about, 4-day increments, 5-day increments, bump, 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 bump. And you notice, here we go, I'm just going to go through the cycle again, and then we're going to go the last one. That's 716. Here we are today. There's not a whole lot of a difference. Maybe a little bit of expansion, especially over in this region compared to this. It was kind of thin there. But what you really want to see is building depth in here, and we're not seeing that. If anything, we see some spottiness. So what's been happening is, and we'll get into this, the Kelvin wave cycle has kind of paused a little bit. Warm water that was here is working its way into what we call the Nino 3.4 region. This is what scientists really use to measure El Nino. It goes from about here to about here and draw a box around it right there. And when you, not so much here, it's here. When the trades here pick up the warm water, start pushing it off to the west and filling this area, this is what affects the jet stream. Now, you hear people talk about the blob. The blob is warm water off the U.S. West Coast. This is more than likely related to a thing called the switchover in the Pacific decadal oscillation. Okay, there's two phases to that too, but they run anywhere from 15 to 30 years. We believe that the PDO is starting to shift. That is going from what we call an inactive phase to an active phase. So this El Nino, if that were true, might be the start of many more and stronger ones to come in the future, if this blob is in fact related to the switch over to the PDO. And then there's been some discussion about whether this PDO will help support support high pressure off the U.S. West Coast that'll block storms in the winter from coming in, and et cetera, et cetera. But the typical thing is, once you get the storm track going and storms start moving across, you'll rapidly see these water temps out here start dropping as you get 40 and 50 and 60 knot winds continuously blowing over this area. It starts upwelling, mixing the surface surface water down with water deeper, and the temperatures will drop off very quick. We suspect that will have absolutely nothing to do with blocking high pressure. Now, the reality is there's always high pressure off the U.S. West Coast. It fades in as you work your way into the winter months, and really the best opportunity for great surf in a major El Nino year is when the high pressure does block and creates dead air over California, let's say, but the storms rage, they approach, and then they veer off to the north at the last second. So that's sort of our thought of what's going to happen, but at some point we expect the storms, if this is a super El Nino developing, will just blast right through the blob or the blocking high pressure. But then the downside is, you get all the rain, you get snow in the mountains. This is all very good stuff for California. From a surf perspective, it basically turns everything into a mess north of Point Conception, and if it's a really good El Nino, even Southern California can turn into a very wet and stormy mess. Anyway, so warm water building here, but paused, not building any more recently. But then everyone wants to compare this El Nino to the 97 El Nino. So here we go. Same time of year. No comparison. Much more warm water buildup in this area in the 97 image. The scale has not changed. There's no funky statistical games going on here. Just much warmer, but that was to be expected. The 97 El Nino, every El Nino has its character. The 97 El Nino started late in the game. It went from La Nina to El Nino in a couple of months. Just raging westerly winds. This year has been characterized more like westerly wind burst, a break, westerly wind burst, a break, and the character of it has been more sort of start and stop, start and start, start and stop, but very consistent in that pattern, and the westerly winds always come back. The thought being that actually might be somewhat to our advantage. The peak of the El Nino might be later in the season, maybe January, February, or March, which would not be a bad thing. It would give it more momentum. It would carry the El Nino longer into 2016, and maybe even help impact the 2016 fall and winter months as well, and certainly the summer months. So, you can have your big blast all at once, which is, was good in 97. I remember that quite clearly. It was a feeding frenzy for sure. Or maybe this year's event will be a little bit more steady pace, not quite as frenetic, maybe more like 82, 83, just a different style. 82, 83 didn't even really get developed. There was no warm water this warm in 82, 83 at this time of year, and that was a super El Nino. 97 was the number one. 82 was the number two strongest El Nino ever, at least in recorded satellite in the satellite era. So, this one has a different character. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. And just diving into that pause thing some more. So here we are, Ecuador, Galapagos Islands, high-res water temperatures for today. Looking solid, not insane, but solid. We're going to go back to the 2nd of August, and notice there's basically no real change. We'll just go back and forth. The pattern looks very the same. So we're in a pause in that no warmer than normal, no warmer water than what's already here is coming up, but it's not getting any colder either. It's just holding steady. So that's not unexpected, and we'll show you why. Let's take a look subsurface. Here's West Pacific, East Pacific, depth, buoys associated with the TAO buoy array, sensors on those buoy lines. It's not so much the absolute temperatures, though. Notice this pocket here, the 28-degree isotherm, is actually moving steadily to the east, and core temperatures in here are warming. That's the result of massive westerly wind bursts, westerly winds that occurred in the late June, early July time frame. A large Kelvin wave is in development. You can see it here. Here is the anomalies. Notice 4-degree anomalies here, and there's actually a bunch of water working its way down this way. 6-degree anomalies pooling up, and the Galapagos, so here we are, here's 100. The Galapagos are off at about 90, so they're off the edge of the chart. Notice one of the buoys is out, so you have no data here, so we can't really see what's going on subsurface. But the thought is that there is a large Kelvin wave. There was warm water here. The westerly wind burst occurred, building warm water in this area. It's starting to merge into the pool that was already there, and all this is going to make a big gush to the east at some point. Here's another way to look at it in this image here from August 1st. You can actually see a little pocket of actually cooler waters suggested here that will boil up first, and then the big Kelvin wave is going to come right in behind it. So that pause in the surface warming that we saw on the previous charts should be short-lived. Within the next couple of weeks, this guy's going to, the first little pocket here is going to start erupting, and then it's just going to go for 2 months. And then if we have another westerly wind burst, as forecast with in association with the active phase of the MJO in the late September, October timeframe, 3 months after that, yet another Kelvin wave will come. And if there's just nonstop westerly winds, it might not even be distinct Kelvin waves. It might just be a continual rush of warm water. We're running a little bit long, but there's a lot of data here. We're going to go through this. So here's subsurface temperatures again over time down the side here, and the Galapagos basically in Ecuador are here. 1 Kelvin wave in March, really warm right there. Another Kelvin wave, you can see it right here in the May-June time frame. Here's the Kelvin wave from the very strong westerly wind burst that occurred just recently in the June-July time frame. Here's the warm water. You can just see it just starting to build here and bloom. And now these extra warm temperatures. Oh, here we go. We'll do it this way. There you go. 2.5 degree anomalies building out here. Compared to anything this year, this is by far the strongest Kelvin wave yet, and it's still just getting organized. So needless to say, much warm water is on the way. So the question is, what impact is this having on the atmosphere? Let's find out. We're going to look at 2 indices. If El Nino were doing its thing, you would expect to see more precipitation in this area, right where the warm water is. Anomalies for the last 30 days, August 9th, you see that. But they've found a way now to actually assign an index value to that. And we're not going to get into all the details of it. And again, I'm not claiming to be the expert on this. This is a rather new find for myself. For the last 30 days, number 2.75. What does that mean? So effectively what they're doing here is measuring rainfall in this area and rainfall in this area. Notice Tahiti is right down around here, Darwin, Australia right here. So very much like the Southern Oscillation Index, comparing what's happening here versus here and mashing the two of them together to find out what the difference is, figuratively speaking. But again, it's satellite-based rainfall instead and coming up with a number. And here you go. In 83, at the peak, it was what? About, the black line is what we're looking at. It was at about a 2.3. Okay, another El Nino 92, about a 2, let's say. 97 up to about a 2.8. And the number we're at right now, 2.75, and we're not even into the heart of the El Nino season. So that suggests, and again, we're not going to go get all overhyped here about anything, but what that suggests is if the rainfall pattern has shifted that much, as indicated by that 2.75 number, then that suggests that the effects of El Nino on the atmosphere are already pretty solid, and at least from a precipitation standpoint. And we've looked at the water temperatures. They're good. They're nothing compared to 97, but the water temperatures are quite warm here and building and going to get a lot warmer with that next big Kelvin wave coming in. And apparently in the atmosphere, there's also a pretty solid impact, 2.75. Now there's yet one more index we can look at. Another index, multivariable ENSO index. Okay, basically this index takes a host of variables, not just rain, not just pressure, but like 5 or 6 things, mashes them all together, and then comes up with a number to identify how strong this event is compared to others. You can look at the chart, see for yourself. The pink here is 97, had a value of 3 at its peak. The green is the 82 El Nino. It had a peak of 3. The 2015 event is right here in between the 97 and the 82. It actually fell the past month. It's basically, it was a 1.97 or so, and it dropped like, 0.05 of a point. The expectation is with the next Kelvin wave coming in, when that starts to erupt, we expect these numbers to start going up again. So anyway, from the point being, this chart and the previous chart both say our El Nino is very well coupled. The Southern Oscillation Index is saying it's pretty well coupled. We're starting to see, at least according to the model, a tropical system recurving heading towards the Gulf of Alaska in early August. That suggests pretty good coupling. Now, we got some other things that are kind of maybe not quite so great. The water temperature thing off of Ecuador is kind of in a pause, but that's expected to kick up. And, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but what we're talking about here is this El Nino right now is in the super, or expected to move to the super El Nino category. You got to get up to a 3 on this index to be a super El Nino. So we got a ways to go, and we're actually going in the wrong direction. But still, we're in the right place for the time of year. Again, who's going to believe a model 3 or more months out? Well, it's fun to speculate, but you never know. So let's go do that real quick. And just real quick, the Nino 1.2 index, surface temperatures, we saw the pause. This chart bears it out. Currently 2-degree anomalies. It was up to 3 there multiple times. The Nino 3.4 index, the main index used to gauge the strength of El Nino, on a tear up to 1.8 degrees, highest it's been so far of this run. By any normal standards, this is it would be, I'd call it a strong El Nino. This is approaching where we were in the 2009-2010 era, and we're only in August. We got months to go to get to the peak. And finally, the forecast from the CFS version 2 model for sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. Currently, it's saying temperatures are about 1.5 degrees. Well, we know we're up in here somewhere right now. But again, the daily numbers, they kind of spike and bounce all around. We actually expect the 3.4 temperatures actuals right now to fade because of the pause that's occurring in warming over the Galapagos. When that cooler water starts working its way to the west, it'll knock out the temperatures a little bit and probably fall more down in line with this. Anyway, this model suggests by about the November time frame, we're up to 2 degrees. I would like to see us up around 2.5 to 2.8 to be in the range of a super El Nino. But we'll see. This is maybe a bit on the conservative side. Conservative is good at this point in time when you're looking at any model. So we'll go with it for now. Right now, things look pretty good. So to wrap things up, not a whole lot going on swell-wise, though a tropical system is forecast to recurve, move into the Gulf. It could make a small, we'll say 13, 14-second period swell for Hawaii and Northern California, if one believes the model, if everything lines up, the stars align, etc., which we're not holding our breath. But it's a super nice tease. Otherwise, El Nino, all the data we see suggests things are moving very strongly, very steadily ahead into at least strong El Nino territory, bordering on super El Nino territory, if you want to believe the models long term. So things are looking very good. We are in the calm before the proverbial storm, the month of August, the dead zone before the fall weather pattern kicks in, and then everything, if it lines up, is going to start moving very quickly. If you're training, if you're getting surfboards, if you're getting ready for the winter, now's your time to do it. Get your gun locked and loaded, so to speak, because once things start happening, it'll be a bit late in the game to say, oh, I better get in shape for the big winter surf, because it'll be too late. You'll never make it. Anyway, that's it for now. Things are looking good. See you again next week, same time channel. Thank you. Bye.